Hello everyone, and welcome back to the 8th and final week of the Regal Draft Leagues 5th season. Yep, thanks to results not going our way, we are definitely out of the playoff race. It was always going to be tough to make it through. Not only because we would need a real cascade of results to go our way, but also because we're up against a great player in Mario with a very scary team. Roaring Moon, Grimmsnarl, Water Bear, Gyarados, Firepon. This is a brutal team to prep for. Even more so for me, since he has two dark types that are immune to Psy Spam, and a Half-Flame Ogerpon and Roaring Moon to turn my own son against me. However, the battle with this week's prep wasn't really around how the hell do I win, it was how the hell do I fit in everything I want to bring. I want to stick to the 2-2-2 approach that worked so well last week. Psy Spam plus Sun plus support. The nerfing of Urshifu and Gyarados is worth the power up of Ogerpon and Roaring Moon in my opinion. And Iron Crown plus Indeedee are actually pretty good into Roaring Moon and Grimmsnarl thanks to the coverage they get. So what do I bring in the two support slots? With Trick Room on the table, I think I have to bring Clefairy, which actually frees up a move slot on Jumpluff. Could run double redirection, but with Jumpluff having that 5 move syndrome, taking away part of that choice paralysis is great. So 1 slot and 4 actually pretty decent mons to choose from. Blastoise is very good defensively into Urshifu and partly into Ogerpon, but offensively it's pretty bad, especially when I'm looking to bring Sun. Vantula is pretty good offensively, but is also frail, so it's going to be tough to bulk it out and maintain that offense, especially when it's going to take a turn or two to get the support I want off. So we're down to 2, Scrafty or I Am Valiant, and it came down to one thing: offense. It was such a tough choice over which one to bring, but it came down to the fact that Valiant was faster and had slightly better damage output. Fake Out and Intimidate are great, but Fake Out is useless in Psychic terrain, and Intimidate doesn't really do much into Urshifu. The fact that Valiant can outspeed and taunt a booster speed Roaring Moon to prevent potential Tailwind with its own booster speed just kind of sealed the deal for me. Iron Crown is essentially the same Iron Crown I bought last week, just slightly tweaked in the stat department. I had to go max speed to always go before a non-Scarf Urshifu, which has taken away some of that bulk that I liked, but otherwise it's exactly the same. Poujing is running a set that I ran earlier in the season, stats and everything, but instead of Morning Sun, I've tacked on Psychic Fangs. This not only lets me break screens from Grimmsnarl, but also lets me hit Urshifu for decent damage if it doesn't Terra. Def doesn't change. I swear, I've mostly just switched the defensive EVs around, and that's pretty much it all season. The hardest choice has been whether I run Dazzling Gleam or Life Dew or Helping Hand. Love this mon. Indeedee, I decided to run Scar. It is a pretty obvious bring. I'm sure he'll be expecting Scarf or Sash, but with this EV spread plus the choice Scarf, I outspeed Adamant, Scarf, Urshifu, and Oko. I've kept on Energy Ball, but honestly, I think I'm only ever going to click Dazzling Gleam or Expanding Force. And that was kind of another reason I wanted to go for that Scarf. If I've only got a choice between two moves, then I might as well get a boost somewhere. Finally, we have our Sunsetter, Jumpluff. Riolu had his chance last week. I've not used Jumpluff yet this season. I had to bring it. Tailwind, Sun, +2 was always going to be the set. Because of Clef, we don't need Rage Powder. Though, I still went back and forth on that. Because Ogerpon with Follow Me exists, I decided against Sleep Powder. I didn't want Ogerpon to just come on the field and just keep clicking Follow Me as I send a Sleep Powder into it. This was the Mon I struggled the most with. Encore, Strength Sap, Reflect, Pollen Puff, Giga Drain. So many moves that were good in this matchup. And that's not taking Protect into account. In the end, I decided on a Strength Sap. Get some healing, plus reduce the attack of all those physical mons. And the funny button, Bullaby. I don't expect Pluff to output any real damage. To be honest, I don't expect it to stick around too long. If it's allowed to stay on the field after clicking Tailwind and Sunny Day, then I'll probably just click Strength Sap to help it possibly get one of the two back up again. So, yeah, last week's team was really fun to play, so I thought, why not run it back with a very slight adjustment?
So, yeah, I totally forgot to turn my mic back on after a coughing fit right before the match. As you'll see though, it's probably a good thing. So, go the battle without my annoying voiceover.
Well, yeah, that was a match. I really wanted a fun one to end the season, but Gyarados said no. I could sit here and complain about the hacks, and yeah, it massively tilted me, and I'm honestly still pretty tilted. That's part of the game, and dealing with them is something I absolutely have to get better at if I'm going to be successful. If I'm being really honest with myself, I didn't deserve anything out of this match at all. I played like complete ass. Both me and Mario were super frazzled by the dock mess up. Mario because he saw a Mon on my terror sheet and my team sheet that wasn't on the roster in the docks, and me because I initially thought I'd messed up my terror sheet for the second time this season. I lost like most of my turn 1 of game 1 having to go and check. It just completely took me out of my game. But I lost this match before any of that even happened. I was so confused by seeing no Grimmsnarl and especially no Ogerpon, which I thought were two really good Pokemon into my team. Two Pokemon that I'd spent a hell of a lot of my prep time on, but I ended up leading incredibly badly in game 1. To be honest, the no Jumpluff on my roster kind of explains the no Ogerpon bring, but I feel like Ogerpon was still going to be pretty good into my Side Spam mode. I knew with the Side Spam mode I wanted to go with in game 1, it was supposed to be Iron Valiant, Iron Crown, with Indeedee and Clefairy in the back. But I got so wrapped up in the no Ogerpon, no Grimmsnarl that I didn't think properly, and I was caught between, do I go Sun, do I go Side Spam, and ended up completely screwing up the team composition and not really bringing either. I was so mentally behind after that it was always going to be an uphill battle. Even more so when you look at how well Mario had prepped and then how well he played, reacting to that situation as well. It was always going to be tough to beat him today. But putting my mental into the gutter made it near impossible. And the hacks just added on to that. I also made a bunch of mistakes in my team. I was supposed to have coaching on my Iron Valiant. I was supposed to have Trick on my Indeedee. I didn't see Helping Hand EQ coming, so I'm not sure if I would have clicked coaching turn 1. I should have absolutely taunted the Gyarados. With Yan Mega being brought, it was highly unlikely that Tailwind was on Roaring Moon, so there was absolutely no need to taunt it. But again, wasn't thinking clearly. Gyarados was an utter pain in the ass though, and I did not give it enough respect in prep. I pretty much went Sun plus Clear Amulet Gouging Fire, took the Thunder Punch onto Valiant, and that was the end of it. The hacks, as tilting and difference making as they were essentially my own fault, brought on by that lack of prep. Season over, and honestly, it couldn't have come sooner. Losing is never fun. And losing the close battles I have this season, I think, honestly, outside of like this battle and maybe one other, all of my matches have been ridiculously close. And it's made this season incredibly difficult mentally. So we'll do a review. I've honestly already got a ton of notes, my end of season review. So do that, and we'll put this season behind us, on to season 6.